There was once a catechism teacher who was teaching his students, kind of young students, about this story, the story of the prodigal son. And the catechism teacher was really trying to emphasize the resentment that this older brother had and how this wasn't a very good thing. So he was kind of stressing that part of the story that we heard today about the elder son and his resentment. And finally, just towards the end of the class, to make sure that the students understood, the catechism teacher said, okay, now when the younger son came back, who was a sinner who had been away, who do you think in the story was the most upset or disappointed that the young son came back? There was silence for a minute or two, and finally one of the young students put up his hand and said, "The fatted calf." So the story, of course, of the prodigal son is really perhaps one of the most famous, the most beautiful, the most compelling parables that we have of Jesus. And that, of course, is quite a statement to make. This story about this son who's gone away, who has lost his way, who felt that he had given up, that his father could never welcome him back as a son, and instead chose, he thought, to come back as a slave, as a servant, who comes back, and hope beyond hope, his father welcomes him with open arms as a son again, and does this incredible feast for him. This story really is a story that connects with all of us, because we too at different times in our life long for and seek that reconciliation. Just as the prodigal son accepted God's love, or the Father's love in this way, we too long for that homecoming, that restoration to God's love, that forgiveness in our lives. Beautiful story that kind of illustrates this, and my apologies if I've told it before, it's one of my favorites, is found in a book by Ernest Hemingway, a short story actually called The Capital of the World. And in this short story, Ernest Hemingway tells about a father. And this father had a young son who was a teenage son. I think they're living in a city somewhere, Madrid or something like this. And the young son's name is Paco, which is short for Francisco, which is a popular name in that area. And this young child, this teenager, he goes away and he gets into all sorts of trouble. He gets into kind of violence, he gets involved with a lot of difficult behaviors, some addiction problems, and eventually he's living there on the streets. And the father begins seeking for his son, and he goes looking through all the streets of the city and he can't find him. And as time goes on, the father keeps looking and looking for his son, searching further and kind of deeper into the city, but to no avail. He cannot find his son. And finally, the father takes a drastic measure. The father pays a lot of money to have a full-page ad ran in the major paper of that city. And the full-page ad just says the following: "Paco, meet me on Tuesday at Hotel Montana. All is forgiven." And then signed, "Your father." So he put that out in the paper, kind of hoping beyond hope that something would happen. That next week on Tuesday, the father went to Hotel Montana at the time that he had advertised, and he was shocked to see a huge line of young men waiting there at the hotel, all named Paco, hundreds of young men desperately seeking this reconciliation with their father. This story really illustrates how we are all searching for this, all of us in different ways, and perhaps it's our relationship with God, perhaps it's a relationship with one of our own parents, perhaps someone else in our own life. We resonate so strongly with this story of the prodigal son because we too seek that reconciliation. We too seek that union, that homecoming, to be accepted, to be forgiven, to be restored in our relationships. This story, of course, is called the prodigal son often, but really it could be called, and many people do call it, the story of the prodigal father, because this story, maybe more than any other parable that Christ tells, teaches us truly about who God is. And who we believe that God is really impacts so much. We can, each of us, have different images about who God is. Maybe God can be seen as a judge. God can be seen as someone who punishes us. We could imagine in our life that God is someone who is maybe disappointed with us, who we never live up to. But this story shows us who truly God is. God is this Father in the story of the prodigal son. And the story of the Father is so remarkable. He is pacing, waiting for his son to come back. He is worrying. He has great hesitation. He longs for his son to return. And then, of course, we see this son feels he will return as a slave. The son has in his mind rehearsed, as we often do when we ask forgiveness. We have this whole story rehearsed, and the son can't even get it out before the father runs to him, embraces him, restores him, and just doesn't welcome him back as a slave, as the son thought, but welcomes him back as the son that he was, not a slave, but a son, and he has this incredible banquet for him. This truly is who God is in our lives. This loving, this welcoming, this merciful Father. This story, of course, is a story about two sons, as the joke I told in the beginning highlights. We see that there is that elder son who is resentful of the father's mercy. There is, of course, the younger son, the prodigal son, who returns after living this bad life. But as many people point out as well, there is a third son in all of this story. And this, of course, is the son who is telling the parable of the prodigal son. This, of course, is God's only son, Jesus Christ. And Jesus is that son who God sends into the world, who the Father sends into the world to seek us out. We can imagine that son being sent by the Father to pay the debts of the son who is living and working with the pigs. Jesus is the Father's son who is sent out of love for each of us. He tells this parable. He gives his life for us to reconcile us with the loving Father. This really is who God is. And during Lent, we reflect upon the suffering, the passion of Jesus. We don't do this to make ourselves feel dire, to make ourselves feel depressed, but really to see how much God our Father loves us, that God sent his Son to die for us and to reconcile us. During this Lenten season, we have many opportunities to focus on how we can have this reconciliation with God, how we can be restored to this relationship. Of course, one way we can do this is by going to the sacrament of reconciliation during this time of Lent. Reconciliation can be a difficult sacrament. It can be awkward. It can be a bit hard to go. But Pope Francis gives us such beautiful advice with this. Pope Francis has, from the beginning of his pontificate, always repeated, God never tires of forgiving us. It is us who at times tire or are afraid to ask that forgiveness, to ask that reconciliation. And when we go to confession, of course, our sins are forgiven, but we also receive healing. We receive forgiveness. We receive reconciliation. So then, as we've heard this incredible, this beautiful parable of the prodigal son this evening, let us remind ourselves truly of who God is for us. That God is this Father who always welcomes us. There is nothing we can ever do to disappoint God. There is no distance we can go away from God that God will not receive us again with open arms. Let us, during this Lenten season, once again turn to God our Father, to hear his voice of mercy and forgiveness, who heals us, welcomes us, and restores us.